All right, well, we will get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Robin Pankey, and I serve as the program coordinator for the Women of Color in the Academy project, better known as WOCAP. WOCAP began in 1994 when a small group of faculty, staff, and administrators came together to discuss the barriers facing women of color in higher education and how to create change. From those early conversations, WOCAP has grown into a vibrant, campus-wide network that continues to champion equity, visibility, and belonging for women of color faculty at the University of Michigan. Today, WOCAP continues its work through the Access and Opportunity Office unit of the Office of the Provost. Our programming includes writing retreats, public lectures, and community events just like this one. Our programming is very robust, and we hope that it creates an inclusive space for women of color faculty and all across our campus. So we're very proud of what we do and very proud to welcome you all today. I want to take a moment to recognize our WOCAP members and supporters that are here in the audience. If you are a part of WOCAP or you've attended an event or you just support our work, could you please give us a little wave? Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. We are here today because of supporters like you. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Camille M. Wilson, who will serve as our moderator. Dr. Wilson is a university diversity and social transformation professor and professor of education in the Marsal Family School of Education. She is also the founder of the CREATE Center and a valued member of the WOCAP Steering Committee. Please join me in welcoming Camille.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Is this on?
Yeah.
Oh, no. This is probably better? Yes. Okay. Great. Well, good afternoon. It is also my pleasure to welcome you today on behalf of the WOCAP Steering Committee. Thank you so much for coming out for this special event. Today we are delighted to welcome best-selling author and poet Crystal Wilkinson. After Professor Wilkinson's keynote, she will be joined by two esteemed University of Michigan faculty members, including Dr. Melinda Price and Professor Robin Wilson. And then if we have time, we will definitely invite a question from the audience, and we'll conclude with the book signing. So first, though, I am thrilled to offer this introduction of Crystal Wilkinson. Professor Wilkinson is a fellowship recipient of the Academy of American Poets. Excuse me. She is the award-winning author of Perfect Black, a collection of poems, and 3 works of fiction, including The Birds of Opulence, Water Street, and Blackberries. Additionally, Professor Wilkinson is a recipient of an NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Poetry, an O. Henry Prize, a USA Artist Fellowship, and an Ernest J. Gaines Prize for Literary Excellence. Named Kentucky's Poet Laureate from 2021 to 2023, Crystal Wilkinson has also received national recognition and acclaim from an array of literary and humanity foundations. Her short stories, poems, and essays have appeared in numerous journals and anthologies, including The Atlantic, The Kenyon Review, Story, Emergence, Oxford American, and Southern Cultures. She currently teaches at the University of Kentucky, where she is the Bush Holbrook Professor in Creative Writing, and she has served as the Director of the Division of Creative Writing. This year, Professor Wilkinson has been inducted into the Kentucky Writers Hall of Fame. Also, yes, yeah. Also, her memoir, Heartsick, is forthcoming from Crown, so that is something very exciting for us to look forward to. Professor Wilkinson has appeared in numerous media outlets, including PBS programs and CBS Saturday Morning. Today, we have the honor of welcoming Professor Wilkinson to Ann Arbor and hearing her share about her best-selling and most recent book, Praisesong for the Kitchen Ghost, a culinary memoir. In Praisesong, Professor Wilkinson explains that she writes quote, with an eye toward the curative power that story has to exemplify the diversity of both historical and contemporary Black lives, end quote. Indeed, through the stories she offers and the recipes she entices us with, Professor Wilkinson counters the invisibility and erasure of Black Appalachians while poignantly conveying how cooking is an act of love. Such love, she shows us, helps forge family bonds through ancestral wisdom, the inspiration of great-grandmothers, and what she calls memory food. The creativity, hope, faith, and perseverance of Black Appalachian families and Black culture shines through her work. This is so, as Professor Wilkinson describes, how despite the hardships of life and effects of systemic racism, including Black displacement and land loss, the delicious preparation and loving offering of food comes with a resolute faith that there will always be plenty, as she shares. So from hot milk cake to no piggy sausages to all things blackberries, and then covering such rich history, she educates and enriches us. She shows us how having plenty means sharing bounties with others, whether through a Great Depression or during a global pandemic. And now we are so fortunate that Crystal Wilkinson will share with us. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Crystal Wilkinson.
Thank you so much. Technology, let's see. All right, can y'all hear me? Yes. Thank you, Camille. Thank you, WOCAP. What a great organization. I've spent the morning and before I came learning about this 30 years of history that you all have with this organization, and I'm honored that you have invited me here, and thank you all in the audience for coming. You know, I almost wanted to read, I have a dear friend, Kelly Norman Ellis, who is a professor at Chicago State, and her signature poem is called "I Was Raised by Women." If I could recite it, I would, because that's what this book is about, and sort of the center of my creativity stems from my connections in paying homage to women. The women that you see on the screen right now, I was raised by them. The only person who's absent there is my mother, and we just lost Aunt Lo, the woman in the red coat. She passed away in August. So, you know, Aunt Lo was an advocate for me and my work. She only had a high school education, but she gave lectures about, she was a quilter, and she would give, I call them lectures, she would say these little talks. But, you know, she was 89 years old, and she gave these little talks that she spent months and months doing research for. Not only did she make her own quilts and put her creativity in the quilts and thinking about what happened during enslavement with quilting and the codes that were slipped into quilting. She also read lots and lots of books before she would go give her little talks. So I told her often that she was a lecturer, a woman of great intelligence who just had a high school education. So she will be missed. What I want to do is read from several sections of the book, and hope I can engage you all in a little bit of conversation. I know we're going to have a group conversation, but please start to corral your questions that you may have for the end. What's happening? People are always surprised that black people reside in the hills of Appalachia. Those not surprised that we were there are surprised that we stayed. My family has lived in the region since the 1800s, and to disregard the Black Mountain presence is to erase both the past and the present. Chroniclers of Appalachian history have sometimes ignored the existence of Black people in the Appalachian South because of the belief that Scotch-Irish descendants who settled in the region were mostly poor and therefore couldn't afford slaves. But records show that early Appalachians did in fact own slaves. And beyond that, the African presence in Appalachia was documented as early as the 1500s, when enslaved Africans and free persons of color arrived in the region with Spanish and French explorers. Though mountain slavery wasn't like the large enforced labor camps of the Deep South, enslaved people worked on farms, in mines, logging, and in kitchens before and after manumission. And the work was still often punitive. After the Civil War, many freed Black people became landowners and lived rural lifestyles similar to those of their white counterparts. Black Appalachians remain in the region to this day, with nearly 2 million Black residents contributing to the region's rich legacy of music, art, literature, and foodways. The invisibility of the Black presence in today's Appalachia is mostly due to the prolific misrepresentation of Appalachia as a whole. The term Appalachian in regard to people was popularized in the 1960s when President Lyndon B. Johnson formed the Appalachian Regional Council with the intentions of strengthening the economy of the area. But by design, no one considered that Black people were among the residents of the region. When Frank X. Walker founded the Appalachian Poets, a writing group that I've been a part of for 30 years, he discovered an entry in a dictionary that emphatically stated that Appalachians were white people indigenous to the Appalachian region. In 2005, Appalachian scholar and librarian Fred Hay petitioned the Library of Congress to change its subject heading to Appalachian people. Prior to that, anyone searching for archival information about the people of my region within the Library of Congress system had to type in the term mountain whites. And even today, dictionary.com says an Appalachian is a native or inhabitant of Appalachia, especially one of predominantly Scotch-Irish, English, or German ancestry. No mention of indigenous or Black people. While the rampant stereotype of the white hillbilly remains, Black people have always been of these hills. And I really need to look no further than my own family as proof. My family has lived for 5 generations in the hills of Casey County, Kentucky, in a little hamlet called Indian Creek. Our home place was cradled by tree-covered hills in the south central part of the state at the head of Green River. Casey County was formed in 1806, 2 years before Aggie of color, my 4th great-grandmother, was likely brought from Virginia to the new territory as an enslaved child. This book is about my foremothers, my kitchen ghost, about the ways in which the foodways of the hills were passed primarily down through the women in my family to me, and how I will pass them on to my generations. The concept of the kitchen ghost came to me years ago when I realized that my ancestors are always with me, and that the women are most present while I'm chopping or stirring or standing at the stove. The art of cooking and engaging with my kitchen ghosts made me realize that food is never just about the present. Every dish, every slice, every crumb and kernel also tethers us to the past. And so that's a little bit from the introduction, and I find this to be more and more and more true. Food is a conduit in some ways to the ancestors for me. When Aunt Lo passed on August 10th, she had a stroke in June I sat with her through the month of June every day in the hospital. I would go, as an advocate for her, I would go early in the morning, so I would catch the first shift of doctors and nurses. And I would sit with her throughout the day, through the shifts, and then I would sit with her, be there at night for the night shift change. And my cousins, I always say that she had 6 children, and I was her 7th child. So we made sure that we were there advocating for her when she went through the stroke. And so she was hospitalized for a month with the stroke, and then she went to a rehab center for a month, and then she was put on hospice and went home to pass away. And so since Aunt Lo has passed, I have found that I have baked a loaf of bread a week in her honor. And so it has gone from bread that I know to bread that I don't know. I have turned into one of those sourdough people too. I've got starters all over the house. My husband is like, oh gosh, what are we making? What kind of scientific experiments going on? But as I'm kneading the dough and thinking about her and her life, it transfers me to other people in our family, and it's sort of a loop that I go in when I'm thinking about her. And so someone asked me, well, how are you, I think as Black women, our relationship to food and the kitchen is complicated, right? For me, it's complicated to know that my grandmother was a domestic worker, and that's how I was raised, but I was also raised to learn how to cook, and what cooking is a way of me showing my family love, but it was also a form of subservience. Although, and I'll talk about this in a minute, I do believe that any Black woman during those times that was in the kitchen, that there was power in that there was a sense of agency. When you provide the food that people are going to eat, you are in control much more than we have come to know when you think about an enslaved woman in the kitchen, or you think about someone who's a domestic worker in a kitchen. You think of them as a particular way. And believe you me, those women yielded power. They had things that they were in control of. So we read a little section about how I learned to cook, which wasn't the way that you would think. There was not a lot of instruction, and I was a very bashful child, and so I'll read a little bit of this. I don't remember exactly when I started cooking, but there is a photograph of me as a girl standing at the stove with a splotch of grease on the front of my dress, holding a spatula, my hip cocked, a grown-up look on my face. I've always felt a power larger than myself while cooking. I learned how to cook by saying nothing, watching how each ingredient was managed, but so much of the art of cooking lies in the body. I gained knowledge about the spirit of the cooks who came before me, the rhythm in the way they sloshed the greens in the sink, removed a pot seconds before it burned, drew a knife close enough to the finger to hold the vegetable taut but never cut themselves. A kind of electric excitement passed through me when I watched Granny cook. Even now, I don't know what to call it, but there was a grace and poise in her kitchen dance. I still remember how my heart raced the first time I peeled potatoes with Granny's favorite paring knife without wasting the flesh. There were no instructions, but she warned me of the dangers of waste. She'd tell me that I'd left enough food behind to feed another mouth, but she never wasted anything. I watched her scrape a bowl of cake batter so clean that it looked as if she'd already doused it in the dishpan suds. She often told me that she came through the Great Depression, something like that old change a body, she said. Even with generations between us, I learned to mimic my grandmother's movements so well that I imagined that I had actually became her. I, too, even being of the generation of plenty, was aware of both the perils of waste and the dread of never having enough. By the time I was 14, I could cook like a grown woman. I'd mastered every challenge Mrs. Henson, our home economics teacher, had put before me. I had amassed a large cache of family recipes on index cards that nested in a blue metal box with yellow flowers, but more importantly, I'd fully gained my grandmother's trust in the kitchen. I helped her with our daily meals, with holiday meals, and helped her prepare food that we'd carry to the church for special occasions. In college, save an occasional fried chicken dinner cooked in our dorm room in an electric skillet, I didn't cook much unless I was homesick. Each time I returned to the creek, my grandmother greeted me with food. At school, I was anxious and timid, but when I settled back into my grandmother's kitchen and took up a cast iron skillet or roasting pan, I felt powerful and whole. I always felt as if I tapped into something much larger than myself. Years later, after my children were born, on trips home, my grandmother would help me settle my children, encourage me to climb into my childhood bed and rest while she cooked my favorite foods. I listened to the sounds of her rearranging pots and pans, smelled the aroma throughout the house. Sometimes during those visits, I ventured out to help her, and she invited me to sit and talk, but she wouldn't allow me to work during those healing times. Sometimes she said, "You're wearing yourself out," and shooed me away. And I returned to the bed. Rick James, Prince, and blacklight posters, you got to be a certain age so everybody that went, knows what I'm talking about. Rick James, Prince, and blacklight posters from my teen years still covered the walls. Sometimes from the bed, I heard my children laughing. Through an open window, drunk on the freedom of the home place and the sweets she'd made for them. Mashed potatoes floating in butter, green beans from the garden swimming in pork fat, fried chicken, a simple salad with iceberg lettuce, tomato, and French dressing, sweet Kool-Aid, and a clear glass decorated with yellow lemons. After I ate the meal, my grandmother brought out one of my favorite desserts, rice pudding with perfect peaks of toasted meringue or blackberry cobbler with ice cream. A perfect meal for an exhausted single mother, a lost job, another failed relationship. When my children were young, I cooked large meals for them every night, like my grandmother had done for me: oxtail and sauerkraut, a roasted hen, pancakes, and homemade hot chocolate on weekends. Chili made from the tomatoes my grandmother canned. When I was missing my grandmother, I made pot roast with potatoes and carrots. I fried corn. I hated stewed tomatoes, but I made them anyway because she did. Chopped steak with gravy or fried pork chops with new potatoes and shuck beans. For dessert, I made strawberry pie or hot milk cake. I worked in fast food. I went to graduate school. I cleaned offices at night. I worked as a news assistant at the local newspaper. I worked in public relations. I became a professor. I cooked everything from scratch in order to heal my family, in order to heal myself. My children were grown before I stopped cooking like that. I've spent my entire life striving to be a competent cook, to show my love and care through food. A few years ago, while doing research, I found Grandma Aggie. She was likely brought to Kentucky by the Wilkinson family in the early 1800s. She had 10 children. He was a wealthy white enslaver son. They were married. As far as I know, Grandma Aggie remained with Grandpa Tarleton until he died. As a free black woman, she owned land in Casey County. Records documenting her existence vanished in 1850, shortly after Tarleton died. But I imagine the rest of her life. I know I'll never know who her mother was or her mother's mother, but sometimes I dream about them. Sometimes I hear their voices. I envisioned Grandma Aggie over a large cast iron pot, first in her master's kitchen and finally in her own. She fed her 10 children, more than my grandmother's 7, more than my great-grandmother's 7, more than my own 3, more than my mother's 1. Did she learn to cook from her mother? Another cook in the heat of the enslaver's kitchen. Cousin Deborah calls and I tell her about our Aggie. Our people, she says, and I wait for her to say more, but we both understand that what she said is enough. Our people. We talk about the photographs that Cousin William posts on his Facebook page, meals he's learning to perfect in culinary school. We make ourselves hungry and we laugh. We talk about each other's children, work, and the extended family. Our conversation is populated with laughter and stories and love. She tells me she is making macaroni and tomatoes for supper. I tell her I am making hot milk cake. I don't think Granny made that, she says, almost as if she's playfully accusing me of something. I think it was Aunt Edith Patton who gave me the recipe, I say. You remember her? We talk about great Aunt Edith's hair, her walk, her round pink cheeks. I tell Deborah about the venison I ate at Aunt Edith's table once. I thought it was the best pot roast I'd ever eaten, I say. I never heard of hot milk cake, Deborah says. I marvel at its simplicity. It's so good, I say, and I make a little sound in my throat that lets her know I mean good. Deborah doesn't say nothing. I think of Grandma Aggie held in captivity when I make the cake. It's something she could have made by combining her own rations with a few items borrowed from the enslaver's kitchen. A few years ago, I was asked to lead a food presentation in Hyman, Kentucky at Dumplings and Dancing, a gathering of farmers, dancers, chefs, and food activists committed to the preservation of Appalachian foodways and music traditions. I was asked to demonstrate Food Network style my grandmother's chicken and dumplings. As a writer, my first inclination was just to write something and read it. But mountain people are stubborn. They insisted. Nervous, I came armed with history. I hang a dress my grandmother had sewn and worn on the door of the kitchen. I place her photograph on the prep station and I begin. I have the heavy stock pot, add chicken, water, and salt. My grandmother used pieces cut from a whole chicken. I just use the breast. While the chicken is boiling, I make dumplings. 2 cups of self-rising flour, ½ cup of shortening, 1 cup of milk. I cut the shortening into the flour, add the buttermilk, sprinkle flour on the table, roll out the dough, then cut the dough in 1.5-inch squares with my knife. The steam in the pot rushes across my face. Once the chicken is done, I reduce the broth. I let the chicken cool, shred it, add the dough squares to the boiling broth, reduce the heat, and let it thicken. Add the chicken. Pieces of tender meat float in the bowl with swirls of yellow fat and fluffy dumplings. I serve the dish with a pone of cornbread. I smile at my grandmother's photograph, see her as a kitchen ghost, thank her for being there. While my cousin Darlene is babysitting her grandchildren for the week in Lexington, she calls me and asks where she can buy fresh vegetables. I point her in the direction of every farmer's market I know, and of course this leads us into a discussion about our heritage. You're doing it, I say, like Granny and Aunt Lo did. I need to get back home and tend it, she says proudly of her garden. I need to do my canning. She tells me that along with the vegetables, she cans chicken. Chicken, I say. In mason jars? I don't remember our grandmother canning meat, but we are the kitchen ghost of the future, morphing and changing the way things are done. Darlene is not satisfied with the produce she found in the city. Not the prices, not the quality. We talk about the value of a vine-ripened tomato from down home. A little bit of jealousy rises up in me when she talks about her garden. Simple. Ancient rituals in the path of our ancestors' footsteps. She hoes and bends and weeds and harvests. She serves her own food on her table and fills her house with love. She is innovative and lively in her kitchen, looking for ways to blend our old ways with the new. My grandmother nursed my fevers, kissed my bruises, encouraged my dreams. She filled first her pots and then our bellies in the same way that her mother and grandmothers had for generations, through slavery, through manumission, through the Great Depression, through wars, through poverty, through segregation, through the civil rights movement, through racism. Women of this ilk always find a way. And I will read just a couple more pieces. For those of you all that don't know about the book, it sort of travels back and forth through the generations. And one of, I think, the most exciting things for me when I was writing is to go from creative, I'm primarily a poet and a fiction writer, so to take liberties to be creative, but also to dive in and do lots and lots of research, both my own familial research through genealogy, but also to research the history of my town, research the history of slavery in Kentucky, and a lot of other things. So I take some liberties in the book to wherever there are absences in research. I do what Sadia Hartman calls critical fabulation. So I have taken liberties, but the names that you'll hear in that section are all people that were listed on the slave rolls when I did their research, and tried to do as much research as I could about what roles they played. So I'll read a couple of, about 2 or 3 pages of that chapter, and then I have a section that I will close on, and then we will dive into our conversation. There is a little bit of there's a little bit of college rivalry humor in this, you'll hear, as I'm talking about my husband, but he always says, stop reading that passage, but I don't. So this chapter travels from me and my child, he don't tell me what to do. Travels from me and my daughter all the way back to Grandma Aggie. And this is also relates to Aunt Lo in the baking of the bread. So this is called What These Women Know About Bread. There is cornbread in my blood. I can make it in my sleep, but it's hard to give someone else instructions unless they are standing right beside me in the kitchen. Ron, that's my husband, called me recently when I was away for a writing conference and asked me for my cornbread recipe. I hesitated, got a little angry that someone who has actually cohabitated with me for almost 15 years wouldn't know how to make cornbread. But then I remembered he's from Louisville, a city boy. Didn't your mama make cornbread, I asked him. He named 2 boxed cornbread mixes that taste like cake, though I'm sure Miss Helen made a fine skillet of cornbread in her day. She's in her 90s now and no longer cooks, but she is a country woman too, born and raised on the Tennessee border down in Franklin, Kentucky. Never mind, I told him, just use the directions on the cornmeal sack. Come to my kitchen and we'll make cornbread all day, but every time someone asks me for the recipe, I flounder. I have to think about it. I want to say, just let me make it for you. But I was too far away to make cornbread for him. In the end, he decided to remain without cornbread until I got back home. The last time one of my daughters asked me how to make cornbread, I made her get on a video call so I could see what we were working with. What are you fixing it with? I asked. She didn't think it mattered. She grew silent. I could tell she was a little perturbed with me. She thought I was clutching some ancient family recipe and not wanting to give it to her. But the truth was I needed to see her ingredients in order to tell her what she'd need. Cornbread with a tablespoon of sugar added goes better with soup beans. You need a more dense cornbread for dressing. That's dressing, not stuffing. Y'all should know that. It's coming up. Hot water cornbread is the better companion for cabbage. I wanted us to be shoulder to shoulder with our aprons on so I could show her like Granny showed me. She needed to hear my voice, and I needed my eye on her so she could get it right. I told her she needed self-rising cornmeal, milk, eggs, and oil for the skillet. She seemed surprised at that short list. Are you sure? She said. I assured her that that was all she needed. She shrugged her shoulders like, here goes nothing. She looked unsure in her body above the bowl, standing all wrong, the bag of cornmeal awkward in her hands. She had none of the confidence I thought a daughter of mine should have while making cornbread. What had I done? What kind of mother had I been? When her cornbread was done, she held her skillet up to the camera for me to see. It looked pretty, had the perfect crisp brown texture that it needed to have. I nodded and smiled. She took a knife, cut into a corner, and tasted it. "It don't taste like yours," she said. And I assured her that this moment too was as old as time, that we never thought we were as good as those old women who'd done it before us until they were gone. I'd made it awkward again. She said, "I love you, Mommy," and hurried me off the phone. I don't think I'd be wrong if I said that my family's love of bread began with ash cakes cooked in an open fire outside a cabin in Kentucky in the 1800s. Though it's conjured by my imagination, I can see Grandma Aggie by the fire, taking the rations of cornmeal, adding boiling water and salt, shaping the stiff batter into ash cakes so there'd be bread. There has always been bread. Grandma Aggie presents herself from nearly 200 years of bread making in our family. She manifests before me from 1810, shows her used to be to my own now. She says, "Now come Saturday, when you get your rations, they'll all be hungry. The women will stand around holding their hurting backs. The men folk will sit on the ground or on turned up buckets, rest their elbows on their knees. You're tired down clean to the bones in your feet, but these children, the old people too, gotta eat. While the cow peas is cooking in the big pot with that little piece of salt pork over the fire, take you out enough cornmeal to make bread for everybody. Now don't use it all, save enough for mush through the week. When them coals get to blazing, take you a large helping of that cornmeal. Depends on how many mouths you're trying to feed. And mix in a little salt and just enough boiling water that your spoon stands straight up in that batter like a proud man. Use your hands and work up a dough, shape your dough up in cakes. Now wrap you some wet leaves. You can use greens, can even use oak leaves around each one of them cakes. Then set your cakes up on them hot ashes in the fire. Don't have no leaves, just put them cakes on the ashes. They'll be just fine. When it gets to smelling good and mixes up with the smell of them peas, everybody will come out and stand around with their tin plates. Some of them will eat straight from the pot with their homemade spoons or even out of the palms of their hands. They won't be on you worrying you about when it's ready, but you'll see the tremble in their eyes, hear their stomachs talking back instead of their voice boxes. When the food's ready, you send somebody back in the kitchen to fetch Judah so she can eat. You put a good dab of them peas on the plate and serve up an ash cake for everybody. Now that's good eating. Old Duval, the overseer, will be there too, now and again, walking, looking, and talking to make sure everybody's where they're supposed to be. But on Saturday nights, we don't pay him too much mind. He'll get some whiskey in him soon enough and go on and go to bed. People will thank you for the meal you've made. Judah will hug your neck and tell you what a good job you've done. You'll smile. You'll make your plate out of what's left, dust the ash off your cakes last. By the time everybody's done eating, the moon will be winking at you from the sky. Them bullfrogs will be singing down at the creek. That old hoot owl will commence to talking to his gal, but you'll sit a while and enjoy them sounds all around you. The stars might come out and bless the world. Old Tat might pull out a fiddle, and his music is so sweet you'd put it up against any song by any bird in them oak trees. You look up at the house up yonder and think about the cooking, the cleaning, the mending, the polishing, all the women's work and men's work too, coming after a little pause for the Lord's Day. You'll take in a big gulp of that night air way down deep in your belly. You'll see the curtain flutter just a little bit up there where Charlton lays his head. You'll nod at him, though you ain't so sure he can even see you among the others. All 20 of you are out of the cabins now, laughing and jawing. You're tired, a constant ache down in your back, but you don't turn in quite yet. Tat's music sounds sweet as tea cake. You hear it with your ears and your heart. You think of your mother back in Virginia. You take that last bite of your ash cake, hum yourself a tune. Little Suze comes over to you with her fingers stuck in her mouth. Her pretty eyes wide, you know the child's still hungry, so you take that last ash cake from your dress pocket. She scampers off with a wide grin on her face and shares it with two more young'uns about her age. You look up and here comes Molly with a skirt full of persimmons and her sweetie Luke struggling against the weight of the deer meat he carries across his shoulder. You suck your teeth and say, "Ooh, Lord, y'all done brought us more work to do." But then you'll grin and take them both in your arms as if they were your own. You'll feel your muscles loosen just a little when you realize tomorrow's Sunday and what a time you'll all have when Sunday supper comes. And so that's my fourth great grandmother, Aggie, coming forward and having her own agency. And I'll close with just a little bit of a summary about what's going on here. Perhaps it's my generation, but I never seen cooking as an oppressive act, though it was for some of my foremothers. I've often remembered the melancholy look on my grandmother's face after she'd cook a large meal. Even in the sea of all her kin, she often looked sad. We never spoke about it, but I chalked it up to longing for her own mother, her daughters who had passed away. She'd worked in white people's homes as a domestic worker, cooked and cleaned her entire life. Perhaps I misunderstood her. In Bell Hook's Yearning, Race, Gender, and Cultural Politics, she says, "In our young minds, houses belong to women, were their special domain, not as property, but as places where all that truly matters in life took place. The warmth and comfort of shelter, the feeding of our bodies, the nurturing of our souls. There we learn dignity, integrity of being. There we learn to have faith. The folks who made this life possible, who were our primary guides and teachers, were Black women." That's how I grew up. The power my grandmother wielded over the white women she worked for as she managed their kitchens, using her generational culinary expertise, was impressive. In our homes, the kitchen was a place of power for the Black women I knew, not one of oppression. The kitchen was where the secrets were revealed, plans were made, advice was given, all while preparing mouth-watering meals. The kitchen was the center of our universe, the headquarters of our very existence. Thank you.
One more time, thank you so much, Crystal Wilkinson, for your words and for your power. To engage us even more for a little bit as we consider the significance of Praisesong for the Kitchen Ghost and Professor Wilkinson's work, we will hear some additional wisdom from Drs. Melinda Price and Professor Robin Wilson. Both Dr. Price and Professor Wilson also have Kentucky roots. First, Melinda Price is a professor and the director of the University of Michigan's Institute for Women and Gender Studies. She was previously the inaugural J. David Rosenberg Professor of Law and the John and Joan Gaines Professor of Humanities at the University of Kentucky. Professor Price's research focuses on race, gender, and citizenship, the politics of punishment, and the role of law in the politics of race and ethnicity in the U.S. and at its borders. She completed her doctorate degree in political science from the University of Michigan and a JD from the University of Texas School of Law. Her undergraduate degree is in physics at Prairie View A&M University. Next, Professor Robin Wilson is a choreographer, performer, improviser, vocalist, educator, and activist who forges connections between art, teaching, history, and activism. She is a founding member of New York's Urban Bushwomen and earned her MFA in choreography from Temple University. Professor Wilson also has expertise in the Katherine Dunham technique. Her work explores the influences of the African diaspora in historical and contemporary dance culture, public scholarship, and social justice through community engagement and in documenting the oral histories of Black dancers in Harlem during the Black art movements of the early 1970s. Professor Wilson's award-winning choreography has been presented across the U.S. and around the world, including in Ghana and in Suriname. Please join me in welcoming Professors Melinda Price and Robin Wilson to the floor. So I'll join you all in just a second and really just listen in. So first I was thinking, Professor Price, given your diverse scholarly background and wisdom, that is so ripe for starting us off in considering interdisciplinary connections to Praisesong and Crystal Wilkinson's wonderful work overall. It would be great for you to get us started. And then next, to engage us even more. As a multi-talented artist yourself, Professor Wilson, we'd love to hear your insights on the artistry of Praisesong and Crystal Wilkinson's work. So thank you both for being here with us.
Thank you for that. Can you all hear me? I can tell this is on.
No.
Oh, I have to pull it closer.
Or take it off.
Okay. So first I want to thank, as I just told Robin, the Wilson sisters are in charge today. So I want to thank Camille for allowing me to participate in this way. I think it is sort of not even enough to say the sort of deep respect and love I have for Crystal Wilkinson, who I knew before we became colleagues at the University of Kentucky. I think in almost my whole life. In Lexington, who I always knew as a writer and a mother. There were all these rumors about cooking, but I have to say, none of which I benefited from directly, but that people always said that about her. But the thing I always think about when I listen to Crystal read are sort of two important things that relate to how women of color survive and thrive in academia. One is you can always hear the mountains in her voice. And I think about the ways that many of us who, particularly those of us from the South, who enter into the academy in institutions like these, and people try to ask us to flatten who we are. So in addition to the profound authenticity of her writing is the profound authenticity of her as a person, which for those of you who were able to see Dr. Ruth Simmons the other day when she was here, this has been a rich week at U of M. I lost where I am, y'all. I've only been here a short time, but it's been a rich week, but she said the same thing about authenticity. And the other thing that I also think about is I have benefited from Crystal directly, but from creative writers in their willingness to make causal connection where my social science training has compelled me to say, where's the data? And that it has allowed me in my own work to venture to fill in gaps around people whose lives go unrecorded in the archives or unassessed in the survey or unasked in the interviews because no one thought they were important enough to study. That she has demonstrated over and over again the ways in which your own lived understanding and an attention to the historical record that we have offers us a better view of both the past and the future. So those would be my comments about Crystal Wilkinson. So.
So I'm from Louisville, not Lexington, just making it clear.
Can you make cornbread?
Yes. And my mother's cornbread was made with white cornmeal, not yellow cornmeal. And I have ongoing conversations with my partner whose family is from Paducah and Franklin, Western Kentucky. And I think I want to go back to intersectionalities in this conversation, because my journeys and how do we deal with authenticity. So as a Southerner, and I often will say to people, when people ask me where I'm from, even though I've been in Michigan for 30 years, I always say I'm from Kentucky. Because that sensibility, even though I was a city girl, yes, I'm playing, this is a lot of shade between these two cities. You know, Kentucky, Lexington and Louisville, University of Louisville, University of Kentucky, these rivalries. You think Michigan State and U of M have a rivalry, you see nothing. But I think this thing about ghosts. Who are the ghosts that sit on your shoulder and talk to you as you go through your day, if you navigate these places where you don't see yourself or don't see value in your voice? And I'm listening to these accents, particularly because it's evidently my twang is getting thicker as I get older. And having lived in New York for over a decade, and when I went to college in St. Louis, I was determined to get rid of my accent. And as I get older and I've crossed those digits, or it's really gotten quite round, my Southern accent has gotten really thicker. And it's about claiming who you are and realizing the wealth of those nonlinear memories and associations. How is it that cooking tells us so much? What is it about our food that heals us? Why can't we have conversations where we're teasing each other about, please don't put sugar in your macaroni and cheese, what's wrong with you? Which is what my niece does. We don't know who she is. But there is this thing about, where food is, I'm thinking about home and place and food and how they create safety. There's a wonderful former choreographer, Jennifer Harge, who I gave this book to as soon as I learned about it, because her work looks at, in fact, it's a famous piece of hers where her grandmother's dress is hanging on stage, because the memory of her grandmother and those stories are with her in her dances and in her films. And so as storytellers, whether we tell stories in our bodies, in our words, or in our foods, I think, and see, I'm talking all the time, I think you're making this connection that we don't realize we're making all the time. And that it's really okay. And it's okay to make jokes about her cornbread and his chicken and, and because that's
Sugar and macaroni.
we don't. That's a story. It's a whole other story. It's a whole other story. I met my niece 2 years ago. She was raised in Minneapolis. She was adopted by others. And so when she came to visit, this is, swear to God, this is true. So she visits my daughter in Atlanta and she says, oh, I'm going to make macaroni and cheese for you. And we're like, great. And we see her put sugar in it. We're like, no. And she goes, yes. My family loves it. See, they clearly don't know anything. They don't know any better. They're from Minneapolis. What else do they know? And so, yeah, but it is about identity and food, and how those places of memory are embedded. And so I really found it powerful. Well, to be perfectly honest, I just saw my stories all written through it. I saw my mother's cornbread. I saw, it was just, I'm like writing notes about, yes, that's that food. I know that. Yes, hot water cornbread versus sweet cornbread versus white cornbread versus red beans and rice, which we didn't eat because we're not from New Orleans, but we ate, white beans and all those sorts of things. So for me, I was just remembering. And one last thing, I will always appreciate the Afro-Latin poets. Oh, thank you. Because I met them when I was living there, and so that voice is really important to hear.
That's a question.
Well, I will pass it back to you.
I loved what you were saying about food being kept. You know, one of the reasons why we have those food fights is because we're so staunchly embedded in what our particular culture is. You know, not just the culture regarding region or the culture regarding race, but it's like a familial culture too. You know, and so that's why you have all these fights between people about like, oh, we're making the stuffing, and then you see they get the side eye like, that ain't what we do. And so, you know, one of the things I do on social media is I love to start a good food fight. All you got to say is, I often start it because, you know, although Kentucky is Southern, Kentucky is not the South. And so, you know, as well, I will say that I'm a good cook. My grandmother raised me to be a good cook, but I can mess up some deep Southern stuff. Don't let me try to make some roux. And I had people in Jackson, Mississippi, like a whole bunch of people gathered around me when I made the announcement at the airport that I put sugar in my grits. There was like a whole, people was like, look at him. So some people are like, oh Lord, she puts sugar. So why do we do that? Because food is culture, food is region. It's enough to where you're ready to fight about, because that's who you are and that's the ground that you stand on, and you're ready to claim it. And I think that's why recipes are so hard, and why there are those jokes. Like my husband's sister, my sister-in-law, she's passed away now, but she always wanted to introduce something new. So, you know, Karen would bring like to any kind of family meal, you know, Brussels sprouts with pine nuts and goat cheese, and everybody would be like, here she comes. And I would, you know, I'd be the only one. I'd be like, this is delicious. And they would be like, that is not Thanksgiving. What is that? Why is she bringing that? Because it's ancestry too, and you want some routine in it because it's part of your heritage. And then sometimes strange things take over, like that in my family. We have a couple of strange things that didn't make it in the book. For example, when I was in home economics class, our first thing we made was biscuits when we got to the cooking section. But then, this is also aging me, so we're in the 70s, right? Our teacher had us make a form of Watergate salad or ambrosia. Well, there's this horrible thing that I make with green Jell-O and cottage cheese, marshmallows. Yes, I know. Look, Melinda's face is tore all to pieces. Pecans, pineapple. And so, and Cool Whip too, I think Cool Whip is in it.
Add mayonnaise.
No mayonnaise, but it has Cool Whip in it. And so I made that in high school, and then I made it as a young mother, and I would make it around the holidays. I just liked it. At high school, I would eat it all the time. And so I make it, and so my children, who are old people now, you know, they're in their 30s and 40s, believe that this is some kind of holiday tradition. So when I met my husband and his kids, and he could see that I was doing all these traditional things, and then it was just like this presentation of this green glob, and he would go, what is that? And my kids were like, "This, you can't have holidays without this." So sometimes strange things get in there.
I think I did. My introduction to my family is a kale salad. This is my one strange thing that they have taken to, but many others, they have not. I have more conformed to them. But, you know, one of the things I was thinking about that's sort of connected to both food and one of the things that comes up is sort of agricultural work a lot in the book, is that from my years in Kentucky, like one of the things I've missed in August is no one brings me tomatoes.
Yeah.
And so if you live in Kentucky, you will be overrun. You will come home and there'll be tomatoes on your porch. People will have them in the faculty lounge. I mean, just like, do you need tomatoes? People text you like it's an emergency.
Right.
Do you need tomatoes? Are there enough? No, I don't have any to give because I'm doing my canning, but as soon as I'm done, then I will give you tomatoes. I mean, it's like a whole dramatic August and September of tomato
Yes.
ferrying. But the thing I think about, and I've said this to you many times, is that you, and this book shows it as well, is that I see you as an ecological writer, in that you are a person who understands nature and the natural profoundly in a way that I just learned this. I see Professor Walker, Jessica Walker up there, ethnobiology, that there is a cultural connection to plants and place and nature. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you think about, this is also true in your fiction writing. Someone once told me about your work, they loved, someone in the Department of Agriculture at UK, because things bloom at the right time of year, right? And I've never read a book as a person who planted anything, so I never cared if the right thing was blooming. But they said that you had, all your books had an accuracy about nature and the land. Could you talk a little bit about how you think about, or the connections that's important to you?
Well, I think that's all part of my rhythms. You know, when someone, long before I wrote Praisesong, someone did well, I ended up writing a book, but at some point it was a research paper about how I use food. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, I didn't, it just went over my head because it's such a part, if I'm, as a writer, as a fiction writer, as a poet, before I became a nonfiction writer, food, land, the rhythms of the land are part of the people that I'm trying to describe. It's character. And so those things have to be accurate, like the rhythms of planting season, what gets planted when. And, you know, it's been a long time since I graduated from high school at 16 and went to college, and I've been away from home for a really long time. And, you know, my garden is not really a garden. It is a few plants in buckets and on my deck, and sort of a garden sometimes, but, you know, I'm always talking about my crops that are not really crops, but I'm very mindful of, it's time to plant this, it's time to harvest this or that, it's time for the potatoes. And it is a way for me to have my finger still on the pulse of my ancestry. You know, there are very few old-time black farmers left in Kentucky, so I think that through my writing, whether it's creative, nonfiction, or if it's fiction or poetry, I see it as my job to keep those legacies alive, to constantly remind people that this legacy is a living one. You know, all of my cousins are still doing that. My cousins run Miller Farm, and they have, you know, it's new as far as the innovation of it. Like, they have all of these weird things. When you go to their farm, they have greenhouses, and they do the farmers market and all of that, but they are using the old ways of carrying the seeds for generations. Like, they're using the same seeds that our grandparents and great-grandparents used, which is remarkable to me, that I can eat a tomato that's the same descendant of the tomatoes that were grown before. And I think that's so very important.
Thank you so much. Well, many of you, if not all, have books, and I know many of you would like them signed, so we want to protect some time for that. And as we gather in a bit for a book signing, we hope that there will be more informal conversation amongst us. So I'm going to go ahead and begin to conclude us, and there may be time for an informal brief question during that transition as well. But for now, Please join me in expressing gratitude for the insights, culinary passions, historical knowledge, and inspiration of Crystal Wilkinson and Dr. Price and Professor Wilson.
Thank you.
So briefly, on behalf of VOCAP Steering Committee, thank you again for coming out and for staying with us to this point. Robin's going to give us some brief instructions, or maybe I will, about the book signing, and we still have food, I believe, as well. I want to acknowledge our co-sponsors, Stamps Desi Lab, the Institute for the Humanities, and the Institute for Research on Women and Gender Studies. We appreciate all the support so much, and again, thank you. Thank you all.